And a very warm welcome to you if you're joining me for what I hope is going to be the first of a series of monthly videos charting the evolution of the Cofiwch Dryweryn murals both in Wales and beyond. With COVID, things have obviously slowed down a little bit in terms of both murals being painted, but also people's capacity to monitor the way in which murals are deteriorating, being repaired, replaced, whatever it might be. So things have slowed down. So I thought it'd make more sense to do like a once a month update to see where we're going. I should say, if you enjoyed this video, if you want more updates on the Cofiwch Dryweryn story, please consider liking and subscribing this. It always helps in terms of the motivation and keeping this going. This is a research project that I'm doing just off on my own back, so all the support is very welcome in developing this. And of course, if you are aware of any Cofiwch Dryweryn murals or graffiti examples that are not on the map, and I'll put a link in underneath this to where you can find the map, do get in touch with me, because the only way that this map can really be kept up to date and developed is with your help and support. So with that in mind, what's been going on in December? Well, we have 6 new entries that have been recorded. And of course, it's worth saying that we don't know necessarily when these were first painted, but this is the first time that they've been formally recorded. So 6 examples that we've got to consider. And for the most part, they are in Wales, but there's one really interesting example that's cropped up outside of Wales. Lots of these are in sort of familiar places. If we stick in for Welshpool, for instance, we've got an example that's somewhere along the route of the canal. This I think is really interesting because it's on that border area of Wales. And I think we have lots of examples of contested murals. So if I zoom out a little bit, give you a context of where this is. This is roughly where that mural example has appeared. And up towards Wrexham, we have quite a few examples, some of which have been removed, some of which have been deliberately damaged. So it's striking to see a new example come in. The mural example itself is probably, if it will load up for me, a little bit basic in comparison to some of the examples. Okay, so this is typical. There we go. So you get a sense of sort of what it looks like. It's a quick version, and it's probably the sort of example of a Cofiwch Dryweryn mural or graffiti that won't last very long. But it's still interesting to see it introduced into what I think is a contested borderland. If you followed the article that I talked about in the video that I released about 4 weeks ago, you will be aware that one of the things I challenge is the idea that Cofiwch Dryweryn murals are everywhere across Wales. But a quick look at the map will highlight that that's really not the case. This whole section in sort of mid-Wales, all along the border, is pretty quiet in terms of examples. So seeing one crop up in Welshpool, I think is quite interesting. Other examples, unsurprisingly, over in West Wales, we're seeing new examples crop up. Sorry, that's not how we want to spell Minllyn. There we go. So Minllyn is a new example. Again, if we zoom out here, this is part of a landscape that has lots of murals, but it was a bit of a gap, I suppose. You know, all around, lots of examples, most of which have survived. So not terribly surprising to see a new example emerge there. If we think further south, we've seen a new example appear near Neath, not quite in Neath, but near Neath. This is in the country park found here, and again, it's a striking example. Another one of these really sort of quick fire murals. Again, no white background, just the red lettering with 3. They should be called Wens, but of course they're painted in red. But you know, the Free Wales Army symbol or motif appearing above the lettering on that one particular example there. But you can see, again, this is a part of the landscape which is, relatively speaking, more quiet. Port Talbot has from day one had quite a few examples. Most of the examples around Swansea have been removed, but there were quite a few there. But Neath just had the one example, so pushing up sort of northeast from Neath, seeing new examples there, I think is, again, interesting. We've got some examples that cropped up in Cardiff as well, but what I really want to share with you today is And it's a bit surreal typing this one in as we type in Smethwick. If you're not familiar with where Smethwick is, we'll zoom out the map a little bit, load it up. You'll see West Midlands and Birmingham. Okay, so let me zoom right out so we can put this in context for the amount of examples that we find on this island, but not necessarily in Wales. There was, or is, an example up in Edinburgh that's been recorded as being removed. We have this one example down in Brighton, which I put in purple because it's a carving. Okay, somebody carved Cofiwch Dryweryn rather than painted it. So I thought I should classify that differently. But arguably, this example here in just around Birmingham is the first formal example of a painted Cofiwch Dryweryn mural. So it looks really striking on the map. This really sort of stands out, and you're thinking, well, what is it doing there? We'll try and bring up the example for you if it's not. Sorry, where's my map? There we go. It'll load up fairly slowly. There we go. It's a slightly smaller image for you there. But you get a sense of, it's not big, but it's clearly visible in the landscape. And we start thinking, okay, well, why is this here? Well, historically, this makes a lot of sense. I mean, really, it would make more sense for it to be a Cofiwch Epynt example in terms of the historical narrative of water being redirected from Wales to large-scale English urban areas. We talk a lot about Liverpool, of course, in the context of Dryweryn, but Birmingham is another one of those major urban areas in England, which is a direct beneficiary of not just water coming from Wales, but also the forced displacement and relocation of a Welsh-speaking population. So, in that sense, it makes perfect sense for this example to appear in the context of Birmingham or in and around Birmingham. So that, I think, is a really interesting evolution. It's a time when people are being encouraged to stay inside and not go out and paint murals, but we've still seen 6 new examples emerge in that time, and one of them in what I think is a potentially really provocative part of the landscape in Birmingham. So there we go, that's how the map is looking. We haven't had any additional recordings of examples having been lost or removed. So we've had a few condition reports, but yeah, again, nothing particularly striking. I should mention, honourable mention, because we have a first Cofiwch Dryweryn example recorded in Treorchy. Treorchy actually has another example in the local school called Neath, dealing with the colliery disaster. But in terms of a sort of a formal Dryweryn example, we have that appearing here for the first time. And again, in terms of the landscape, it's not part of the sort of the southern Wales landscape, which has a lot of examples. But nonetheless, a first Cofiwch Dryweryn for Treorchy, or Treorchy, as you might want to call it. Okay, so that's where we are. That's where we are with the map. Again, as I said at the start, please, if you know of any examples, do let me know. We'll get them built into this map as soon as possible. And I very much look forward to sharing with you whatever updates that we have as we get towards the end of January. I'll say a Happy New Year. Enjoy painting murals if you're out there painting them, and we'll see what happens over the next 4 or 5 weeks. Thanks very much. See you soon.